The letter came in a sealed black envelope with a wax stamp bearing no insignia. Inside, a plain white card. 12 words. The room is open again. Come before the mirror chooses someone else. There was no name, but Miriam knew it was for her. Because she was the last one to shut that door. And she knew exactly what it meant. It had been 17 years since she last saw Saint Barrow's. The old rectory was tucked into the hills north of Thistledown, shrouded in ivy and grief. A former convent turned hospice turned ruin. Her mother had died there when Miriam was 13. But it wasn't the death that haunted her. It was what came after. The mourning room. She had only entered it once, the night after her mother passed. Sister Wren, the only nun who hadn't fled the storm, took her there, through 3 locked corridors and down a flight of stone stairs that hadn't seen light in decades. And at the end of it, a single door. Black wood. No handle. No keyhole. Just a brass plaque above it, tarnished to green. Room for the reflected. You may knock, Sister Wren had whispered. But only if you're truly alone. Miriam had knocked. And the door opened. What she saw inside was never clear, even in memory. The room was lit by candlelight that didn't flicker, and the air was filled with the scent of earth after rain, only stronger, older, like soil pressed over something still warm. In the center stood a mirror, 7 feet tall, framed in carved ashwood. And in it, she saw her mother. Not just standing, smiling, alive. Not a ghost. Not exactly. And her mother had said, "Don't forget to close the door, Miriam, or it will find someone else." She had backed out, shut the door. The nun locked it, and no one spoke of it again. Until now. The train to Thistledown was slow, the kind that hummed through fields too ancient for speed. She hadn't packed much. The envelope hadn't said how long to stay. But the moment she stepped off the platform, she felt the change. The sky was dimmer here. Not cloudy, just drawn. As if the light had been thinned by sorrow. And at the end of the path from the station stood a black car, engine running. No driver in sight. Just an open door. Inside, a single note on the dashboard. Follow the music. She sat down. The ignition clicked itself off. And the radio turned on. Choral voices. Wordless. Old. Like something once sung to rocks and bones. And as the music played, the car began to move. No driver. No sound but the melody and her own breath. She should have been afraid. But the moment she heard that choir, her hands stopped shaking. Because she remembered. The same melody played under the floor of the morning room that night. A song the mirror hummed. A song only the dead were meant to know. Saint Barrow's was exactly as she remembered. Twisting stone paths. Black vines climbing broken windows. A bell tower that never rang. And through the front door, past the long-abandoned chapel, a staircase. Leading down. Already open. Already waiting. She descended with only the music to guide her. The candles were lit again. Tall, thin, unmelted. The same as before. Time hadn't moved here. The air was cold and sweet, like iron after thunder. And at the end of the hall stood the door with no handle. Still no keyhole. Still no plaque. Just a mirror to the left of it. Not full-sized. Just large enough to show her face. But what stared back wasn't her. Her own face, yes. But younger. Eyes wide. 13. Wearing the same dress she had worn the night she came here last. And the girl in the mirror looked scared. Then smiled. Then mouthed something. Miriam leaned closer. The girl's lips moved again. But the sound came from behind her. A whisper. Breathy. Too close to her ear. You left the door open. She turned. No one there. Just the hall. The candles. And now, the mirror reflected no one. She reached for the door. No knob. But this time, it opened on its own. With a shudder, like lungs remembering how to breathe. Inside, the same candlelit chamber. And the mirror. Now full length. framed in dark ashwood. But its reflection was wrong. It didn't show the room, or her. It showed a different corridor, with a different version of Miriam walking toward it. Same face, same clothes, but older, and someone, or something, walking just behind her. She stepped in, and the door closed behind her. No latch, no sound, just sudden, absolute silence. And then, "Hello, Miriam." Her mother's voice, soft, but not from the mirror, from the walls. And when she turned to look back, the door was gone. In its place, only glass. The walls didn't echo her footsteps. They absorbed them. Soft stone, painted with shadow. The candlelight followed her like it was tethered, never dimming, never flickering. She wasn't holding a candle, but she could feel it in her hand. Warm, steady, just like the flame in the morning room had once rested in her palm, the night she saw her mother alive again through the mirror. But this time, there was no mirror, only reflections. The chamber shifted as she walked. Not architecturally, emotionally. The first arch she passed through smelled of lilac and dry bedsheets, her mother's scent. The second tasted like metal in her mouth, like bitten tongues and nosebleeds. The third, she stepped through and heard crying. Her own voice, but not from her throat, from behind the walls, from beneath the floor. Miriam. The voice, her mother's, clearer now, no longer a whisper. It came from the wall to her left, where the brick was cleaner, recently swept. She stepped toward it, laid her hand against the stone, and it grew warm, as if something on the other side had pressed back. "I missed you," she whispered. The stone pulsed once beneath her palm, then cracked. Hairline, just enough to see light leak through. She leaned closer. Inside, eyes. Not hostile, not even sad. Just watching. And a mouth. Smiling. Not cruelly. Just wrong. Her mother's face. But younger. Too young. As if someone had built it from pieces of memory, and forgotten to age it. The mouth moved. Words didn't come out. Only breath. And the mirror that wasn't there began to reform in front of her. Glass stitched itself together like frost melting in reverse. And in the growing pain, she saw herself. But the reflection wasn't copying her. It was ahead of her. It took a step. She hadn't. It raised a hand. She hadn't moved. The reflection was autonomous. Then it spoke. "We waited. But you didn't come back. So we opened the door ourselves." Miriam backed away. The walls grew softer. The stone folded like old cloth, and out of the corners of the room stepped figures. All women. All reflections. Some with her face. Some with her mother's. Some with neither, but still familiar, like dreams half remembered. Each held a candle. Each burned blue. "Who are you?" Her voice was brittle. One of them answered. A girl, no older than 9, her hair plaited in the style Sister Wren used to wear. "We're the ones who mourned too long." Another. "The ones who couldn't forget the face." Another, older, eyes hollow. "The mirror gives us back what we loved. But only if we stay." Miriam turned back toward the path she came. Gone. The walls closed like lungs exhaling. No doors. No seams. Only mirror light and flickering breath. And a cold realization. The room wasn't showing her memories. It was feeding on them. "What happens if I stay?" she asked. One of the figures, a reflection with her voice but someone else's eyes, stepped forward. "Then we can keep her. My mother. All of them. The pieces. The ones who smiled when you should have cried." Miriam felt something shift in her spine. A memory, long buried, began to rise. She was 13. After the funeral. In the rectory's chapel. Sister Wren had asked her, quietly, "Do you want to see her one last time?" And Miriam had said yes. Not because she wanted to. Because she thought she had to. To mourn properly. To say goodbye. But what she saw in that room wasn't her mother. It was something that wore her mother's face too well. Now, standing in that same room, she realized something awful. The mirror doesn't show grief. It holds it, preserves it, refines it into something you'll never stop wanting, until it replaces you. One by one, the reflections began to dim. The candles they held bent inward, and their eyes turned hollow, hungry, but not for her body, for her memory, her version of the dead. Then she saw her mother, truly, at the center of them all, not smiling now, tears in her eyes, but her mouth sewn shut with candlewick thread. Miriam screamed and ran, through the women, through the mirrors, through the light. The room tried to stop her, glass walls shifted, shadows reversed. But she didn't look. Not this time. She shut her eyes and whispered the only thing her mother ever told her that truly mattered. "Close the door, Miriam." Her hand found a handle. The only one. Cold metal. Slick. She turned. The door opened outward. Light spilled in. The real light. Morning. Dry air. Stone under her feet. The hallway. Back. Somehow. She turned. The morning room behind her had gone dark. Silent. The door swung shut on its own. No sound. Just finality. A single plaque above it now. Plain brass. Newly etched. For those who mourned too long. The hallway was wrong. At first glance, it looked like the one from her childhood, the stone passage outside the morning room. But the light was too warm. The shadows curved in ways they shouldn't. And every few steps, the pictures on the walls changed. Not just moved. Changed. The first frame showed a nun kneeling by a gravestone. The next, that same nun walking into water. The third, Miriam's own mother standing at a window, her reflection in the glass turning away. This wasn't escape. It was a corridor of mirrors pretending to be stone. And Miriam knew it. Still, she walked. Because it was the only direction she had left. At the end of the hall, a chapel door. Half open. Golden light spilled out, warm and inviting. Too warm. Too gold. She stepped inside. And what she saw made her knees buckle. Her mother, sitting in the front pew, just as she'd looked before the sickness. Reading a leather-bound book with no title. And beside her, eyes closed in soft prayer, sat Miriam. 13 years old. Hair in braids. Dressed in mourning black. Breathing. The older Miriam, the real one, backed away. This wasn't real. This was memory feeding on itself. But her mother turned. And smiled. So gently. "You came back before the grief was finished." "You're not her," Miriam whispered. The figure blinked. Then nodded. "No. But you remember her perfectly. That's all I need." The younger Miriam stood up. Walked toward her older self. Her face was wet with tears. But the tears weren't falling down. They ran upward, retreating into her eyes like memories being rewound. And then she opened her mouth. But instead of speaking, another voice echoed behind her. "Don't let her replace you." It was Sister Wren. Miriam turned. The nun stood in the rear of the chapel, face older now, eyes harder. She wasn't a memory. She wasn't an echo. She was real. The morning room opened again because someone let their grief grow teeth, Wren said. "That someone was you." "I didn't mean to," Miriam said. "I was a child. I just wanted her back. And it gave her to you. But only the parts you remembered. The rest, it filled in with itself." Miriam turned to look at her younger self. Now smiling. Blankly. And her mother? Her smile had widened. Too far. Her teeth too white. Too even. Too many. Wren moved quickly. Snatched Miriam's wrist. Dragged her down the side aisle. "It's feeding faster now." Every time you mourned her without healing, you gave it more shape. What is it? Miriam asked. Grief. Old grief. The kind that doesn't belong to anyone anymore. The convent buried more than the dying. It buried feelings that had nowhere else to go. And those feelings became faces. Behind them, the chapel began to twist. The pews rose like ribs. The stained glass melted into liquid color. The altar stretched into a long mouth. And the child Miriam laughed. Only once. But the sound echoed with 17 years of longing. They fled through a side door. Into a stairwell that wound upward. Not underground now. Not stone. Wooden. With papered walls. Wren explained between breaths. There are 5 levels above the morning room. Only one of them is real. The rest are made from grief you haven't finished digesting. How do I find the real one? Miriam asked. Wren handed her something small and heavy. A mirror shard. About the size of a coin. Its surface burned white. This belonged to the first girl who ever survived the room. She gave up her reflection to get out. Now it only shows truth. Miriam held it tightly. Climbed the stairs. On each landing, a hallway. Identical in shape. But in each one, the windows showed a different scene. A sunlit cottage where her mother sang at the piano. A hospital room where her mother died with eyes open, unblinking. A version of the house where Miriam herself was in the bed, not breathing. A burned-out chapel, where dozens of figures made of wax sobbed silently at an empty casket. Each landing whispered to her. Each one called her name. But only one made the mirror fragment go dim. The 4th landing. A narrow hallway. Plain. Cold. Empty. Nothing on the walls. No illusions. Just silence. She stepped into it. And the mirror fragment shone brighter. Wren nodded. This is the level they can't change. Why? Because it's the memory you've never dared revisit. Not the grief. The guilt. At the end of the hallway, a door. Wooden. Simple. But on it, the same brass plaque from the morning room. Room for the reflected. And Miriam remembered. She hadn't just seen her mother alive again that night 17 years ago. She had said something. Something she'd buried. Now it came roaring back. Can I stay with you, Mum? Only if you promise to forget the rest, her mother had said. And Miriam, small, broken, desperate, had nodded. Yes. I forget them all. Just you. She had made a deal. With something that lives inside longing. And it had waited. Fed. Grown. Now it wanted her for real. Wren placed a hand on the door. You have to remember them all now. Not just her. Everyone you lost. Everyone you refused to mourn. The door opened. Not inward. Not outward. It peeled. Like skin. And on the other side. Faces. Not ghosts. Leftover grief. And the mirror. Waiting. Smiling. The door peeled away like bark. Behind it, a chamber made entirely of reflection. Not glass. Not mirror. But memory polished into a surface. Miriam stepped through and saw not herself, but 1,000 selves walking in every direction. Crying, running, reaching, aging backward, collapsing forward. Some were younger than memory. Some were older than death. Each version had lived some variant of grief she had tried to forget. And the mirror drank them all. Sister Wren stepped in behind her and whispered, "This is the true mourning room. Not a place. A culmination. Culmination of what? Everything you didn't grieve. Everything you refused to feel. It didn't disappear. It sharpened. The mirror pulsed. Not like a heartbeat. Like a mouth preparing to speak. At the center of the room, it stood, the same tall frame from years ago. 7 feet. Ashwood. But no longer holding just a reflection. It held a person. Miriam's mother. Still smiling. Still warm. But this time, tethered. Roots of light bound her feet. Wounds of candle flame burned along her collar. And her eyes, they shimmered with every version of her that Miriam had tried to keep alive. "Mum," she whispered. The woman in the mirror blinked. Her smile weakened. "You've kept me alive too long, love." Her voice was gentle, cracked with warmth and sorrow. "You stopped remembering the truth, and only held on to the shape. Now the shape won't let me go. It's wearing me." The mirror rippled, and the other voices came. Miriam's father, her childhood friend, a neighbor she hadn't seen since she was 7. Each face emerged, half-formed. Each spoke. "Do you remember how we ended? Do you remember the last word I said? Do you remember who I were, or who you needed me to be?" The voices were not cruel. They were hungry, not for revenge, for recognition. She clutched the mirror fragment Wren had given her. Its surface flickered with white fire. She looked down. In it, she didn't see her face. She saw a moment she had buried. Her mother's body on the bed. Miriam holding her hand, promising to stay forever, promising not to move on, not to live past her. It hadn't been grief. It had been a vow, a quiet pact with sorrow. And the mirror had answered. "You kept me alive in your pain," her mother said through the glass. "But I am not your pain." Miriam stepped closer. The other selves reached out to stop her, reflections born of longing and denial. But they couldn't touch her now, because the mirror shard in her hand reflected only the truth. And truth burns fiction, even the kind you love. Sister Wren spoke one last time. "If you want to free her, you have to stop loving the memory more than the person." Miriam nodded. She pressed the shard into the mirror's surface. It didn't crack. It didn't scream. It absorbed. Every false version of her mother began to dissolve, weeping, fighting, smiling, and behind them all stood the real one. Tired. At peace. Ready. "I'm ready to go," her mother whispered. "You're strong enough now." Miriam reached for her hand, touched it, warm. For a moment, the two stood together, not in grief, not in longing, but in farewell. And then the mirror closed gently. A hush like wind over water. No shattering, no scream, just peace. The chamber dimmed. The candles around the room went out, one by one. Wren stepped back, and Miriam looked down at the shard. It had turned black. Not empty. Just finished. They returned to the surface. Saint Barrow's had changed. No more flickering windows. No whispers behind doors. No faces in the glass. Only stone, wind, and silence. The house was finally what it had always pretended to be. Abandoned. At the gate, Wren paused. Not many close it all the way. Most just trap themselves inside a better memory. "Why didn't you stop me?" Miriam asked. Wren smiled sadly. "Because no one can close your grief for you. Only you know what it shaped into." Back at the train station, Miriam sat on a wooden bench. No letter. No shadow. No message. But a blackbird perched beside her. Stared once. Then flew. And she felt it. The morning room had returned to silence. At home, she placed the black shard in a wooden box and locked it away. She didn't bury it. She didn't burn it. She simply let it rest, like grief should. And each night, when she passed a mirror, she no longer paused to listen, because there was no voice calling her back anymore. She had closed the door, and this time, it would stay that way.